What's up guys, welcome back to DCS World and welcome back aboard the A-10 for my tutorial series. So today is going to be a bit of a shorter one. I just want to touch on some of the advanced functions and options of the HUD. So it's this guy up here. As I mentioned before, the HUD is one of our sensors, and because it's one of our sensors and it displays a lot of information, we can customize some of that information. So how do we do that? First, we need to look down below the left side MFD. If you remember the IFF-CC switch right here, we need to right click that once to the center position so that it's on test. And then if we look back up at our HUD, our data is now missing, and instead we have a menu. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause my camera here so it's a little bit easier. Boom. So now we're looking up at the HUD. We're going to use a few buttons on our upfront controller here, the UFC, to cycle through these options and just see what they do. Some of these options I'm going to not delve deeply into because they apply to other concepts, but I'll just touch on them. The first one is called CCIP consent option on or off. That relates to a function of CCIP weapons delivery, which I will do a full video on later, but it relates to just how you release weapons in CCIP mode. We've got BIT, or BIT, stands for built-in test, and we can run a couple of system tests from here. So we can test the ground collision avoidance system, or GCAS, the VMU, also known as Bitch and Betty, the full-on pre-flight bit, maintenance, and some other things, bit fault display. You generally won't touch this too much, but it's there if you're interested in seeing what they do, so feel free to delve into these options and play around with them. AAS, air-to-air, setups. So what these actually are some pre-planned wingspans for our air-to-air gun sight, and again, more on that in a little bit, but basically know that we've got a list of aircraft here that correspond to a number of their flight parameters excuse me, and their wingspans. Okay? And I'm cycling through these options using the plus and minus button over here of the select rocker switch. We'll just go down to exit, press enter, back to the main menu. Next one is weapons. And this is just some options that you'll probably never need to change. I know I've never needed to change them. You can manually set if our 30mm cannon, what type of ammo it has. You can adjust the target offsets, variation target offsets for the elevation, things like that. Stuff you won't touch really all that often. Weapons release data. Not really something I've ever touched. Auto scroll, things like that. Display modes. This is one that I do touch a little bit. So there's an auto mode that I haven't touched. There is an option for the gun cross to occlude the CCIP cross. I wouldn't touch that. Not really all that useful. We can turn on tapes. So what tapes are is, instead of just having a numerical readout of your airspeed and altitude, it'll actually display them on a vertical tape. And I can show you what that looks like in a second, so I'll toggle that on. We can, of course, toggle metric. So if we wanted to display our altitude in meters and our speed in meters per second, or kilometers, not meters per second, kilometers per hour, excuse me, we can turn that on here. Radar altimeter tape. I actually do turn this on quite a bit, so I'll turn that on. That just gives you a tape readout of the radar altimeter. We can set how our airspeed is displayed. So currently it's displayed in IAS, or indicated airspeed. If I change the option to true, it'll display our true airspeed. It'll also display our ground speed. It can display our airspeed and our Mach number, which Mach number in an A-10 is subjectively useful, given how slow the airplane generally is. We can also get a readout of our vertical velocity, so our climb rate or descent rate. I'll turn that on as well. We can turn on IFF alerts. IFF for the A-10 really isn't modeled, so that's not very useful to us, so we'll skip it. We'll go back to exit. We've got some maintenance items here. It'll tell you the software version of the computer. Bore site readouts, checksum. Not stuff you'll ever look at, but it's there. And there's apparently a ground collision avoidance system training mode, which I've never used. Honestly, the best training for avoiding the ground is to just fly around and actually avoid the ground. And if you crash, just spawn a new plane. Right? Cool. That's pretty much it. The submenu of the HUD has some options to look at. Not all of them are useful. Some of them are useful. A lot of them are purely subjective as to whether you want them. Let me show you what some of those changes look like, the ones that I set. So to actually get out of this main menu, we go back down here and we left click on the IFFCC switch back to the on position. And if we look, we're back to the HUD. So let me zoom in on the HUD. Boom. All right. So remember I turned on the tapes. So now our altitude is displayed as a tape here. Correction, that's the airspeed. Excuse me. Airspeed is on the left. Altitude is currently on the right. We have a vertical velocity indicator here. And once we were in the air, our radar altimeter would actually pop up as its own tape here. All right. That's pretty much it. Like I said, the HUD has some extra functions. Not all of them are useful. Most of them are subjectively useful. It kind of depends on your preference. And yeah, stay tuned for future videos where we delve into more systems. Until then, I'll see you later.